guys want to just start, or do you want to get a couple games in first?
Yeah, we can just start.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of Two Matts, One Steve. It's been a while, but we finally have a topic that we're very excited to talk about tonight. My name is Matt. Joining me. Yes, my name is Matt. Joining me tonight over there in Memphis is Ronan.
Being inundated by, my sister's friends' fucking children, and I'd like them to die.
Jeez.
You might want to consider the phrasing of that.
Already demonetized, the video is. And also raised in a wrestling hotbed down there in Memphis is Steve.
Yep, I'm here again, and I don't know why.
So I'm going to go ahead and start this off because people might be wondering, well, why are you guys talking about wrestling? You guys watch wrestling? I'm going to start with a little story. It happened about 2 months ago. I was deathly ill this past December, and I was downstairs on my futon, and I got sucked into the wild world of YouTube wrestling videos. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how, but I started watching all these wrestling videos. Now, I grew up in Redlands, Redlands, California. There was no culture of wrestling down there. I never watched wrestling growing up as a kid, aside from like a month and a half. I had a babysitter who was really into WWF, and I remember her having all these WWF magazines and stuff, and I would flip through them, but I didn't watch it or anything like that. Most of my life, I grew up thinking, wrestling, that's just stupid. Like, how can anybody like this? Just sort of ignorant of it all. But I really liked watching stuff like the stories of wrestling, Dark Side of the Ring and stuff like that. There's so many amazing, interesting stories behind different wrestlers and stuff. So I kind of like that stuff, but I never watched matches. I never learned about sort of like the artistry and the art form, I would argue, that wrestling is. And so this past December...
Storytelling.
Yeah. So this past December, I just kind of immersed myself in it, and I came out of it thinking I'm actually kind of a fan of this. Like, I can see why people really like this back in the day, and I was sort of dismissing it out of hand, out of ignorance and stupidity, honestly, for many years. So I will fully admit, I'm the total newbie novice here. Steve and Ronan, you guys have had a love for wrestling that goes way back, way before me. You've seen way more than I have.
No, we had love of a specific era of wrestling.
Well, yeah, that's sort of what I mean. Like, you guys sort of were really involved in it in kind of its 80s, 90s, early 2000s sort of heyday, and I guess we could call it that. But my point is, you guys know way more about what we'll be talking about tonight than I do. If any wrestling fans do come across this on YouTube and I sound like a total idiot on this show, it's because I'm a novice. I don't know all the terms and everything like that, but I do know that I like a lot of it. And tonight we're going to decide, we decided, hey, we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite wrestlers, and I think by the end of it there might be some good back and forth, especially between Steve and I. But we will save that for then.
Spoilers. Get ready for it, Steve. Get ready for it.
Or maybe I'm just trolling Steve this whole time. We'll see. We'll find out in the next hour or so.
No, you absolutely did not. No, you cannot.
Don't spoil it, Steve.
You cannot
Don't spoil
play
anything.
the long game like this.
Really? Okay. Well, we will find out, sir. But the reason why I want to sort of set up my sort of non-experience with wrestling as a kid is you guys, as I have learned through watching numerous documentaries, Memphis, very famous like wrestling territory. So I actually wanted to question you guys about, was wrestling a huge thing in Memphis as you guys were growing up as kids? Were there like local wrestling events all the time? Was it just sort of well known in the culture that wrestling was a cool thing that people would go watch? Stuff like, how did you guys get into wrestling?
You want to go first, Steve, or me?
Wrestling.
Like a Steve. Yep.
I mean, I already started, so I'm talking here. I did not actually get into wrestling myself until video games. Like, I gave no shits about wrestling for the longest time, and so but I loved the games. Like WWE, Raw, and Royal Rumble on like Genesis and Super Nintendo. Played those things all the time. But as far as like actual wrestling in Memphis, yeah, there was a local promotion called USWA. I think Jerry Lawler was the big star of it at the time. And I know that was, even though I didn't watch it, I know there were always people in my house watching it. So yeah, there was a local Memphis-based promotion while I was growing up in Memphis.
Okay, Ronan.
Almost the same as Steve. Hold on a second. Jets Pizza. Good,
Okay,
good
I was
stuff.
hoping you weren't
Yeah.
like strangling a child or something on mute.
No, not yet. But no, I never really gave two shits about wrestling growing up. I knew who certain key players were. Like, yeah, that wrestling guy, Jerry such and such. I knew things like that, but I was not like really into. Oh, hey, somebody's here now. It wasn't until video games, and more specifically, my sister's now ex-husband is a big wrestling fan. And so, like, this is like, PlayStation 2 days, baby. Woo! Playing the greatest wrestling game ever made. WWE SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain.
Incorrect. Incorrect.
You are wrong,
Incorrect.
Steve. You
It is
are fucking
WWF
wrong.
No Mercy on Nintendo motherfucking 64.
Nobody gives a shit about the Nintendo 64.
Blasphemy.
Steve.
Burn
You're talking
the witch.
about
Burn
you're
the
talking
witch.
about old shit. All right, you need to get with the new shit on the PlayStation 2 with its endless story mode that just keeps going on and on and on. But like that's how I started getting into it, was playing Here Comes the Pain. And then started watching Raw, and got more into it. And has old FZR, as Frank used to say, it's like it just pains me that you started to like wrestling, just as wrestling started to turn to shit, because that at that point was roughly the point where wrestling slid into the current slum that it's in right now.
Were you aware, sort of growing up as a kid in Memphis, that wrestling was like a big deal in that area?
No. Memphis was a huge deal back more in the territory days, and it kind of lost that luster somewhere in the 80s.
Okay.
When like that. That's about the point where most of the territories kind of lost their fame. But it was a training ground. Like The Rock, Kane, several other wrestlers, like they were here training for quite a while.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just kind of curious, if that was like a cultural thing, because I've watched a lot of, documentaries about this stuff, and it seems like ingrained in those territories. Like seems like there'd be like a wrestling show every weekend or something that people would go out and do. And that
Well,
kind
I'm
of
not
stuff.
saying that there weren't. Like, there definitely were, those local wrestling shows. I hear an echo. Anybody else hearing that echo?
My mic was muted, so it didn't come from me.
It's not me. Ronan.
Goddamn. I'm not saying that there weren't wrestling shows. I'm just saying that, for me growing up, I didn't pay attention to them.
So it wasn't like where you're in school or like elementary school or something, and the kids are talking about, the latest local wrestlers or anything like that.
Not local ones. In middle school, I distinctly, because by the time I was in middle school, that's when the Monday Night Wars, NWO, Wolfpack, Steve Austin. That's when all that stuff was at its absolute zenith. So
Yeah.
in middle school, I remember hearing about Nitro and Raw, but I was not actively watching it.
Yeah, I do remember in high school seeing a lot of people wearing like those NWO T-shirts. For whatever reason, that's very memorable. I didn't really know what it was at the time,
That's the era that got me into it. Like I didn't really start watching wrestling until the so-called Monday Night Wars happened, and then I pretty much stopped when the Monday Night Wars ended.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, that's kind of our backgrounds on wrestling. So we're gonna give our top 5 wrestlers. I think we'll start with Ronan, then we'll go to Steve, then we'll go to myself, and we'll just go around until all 5 are finished. I will point out that I'm still like sort of immersing myself in learning about new wrestlers and things of that nature. So there could be some on my top 5 that might change later on as I learn more about different wrestlers and things of that nature. So if anybody listens to this and wants to comment on any wrestlers you think I should check out and take a look at, feel free to drop that in the comments section and I'll do it. But let's just kick this off. Ronan, who is your number 5 favorite wrestler?
I will give the number 5, but I do want to ask about the format. Is it am I going to tell all 5, or am I just telling my 5 and Steve's? Okay, I got
we're
you.
doing that. Yep.
All right, so my pick for my 5th most favorite wrestler, and he used to be, when I first started watching it, he was my favorite wrestler, and then eventually, I started to see better quality and realized other sort of things. He slid down, but he's still up there, and so my number 5 would be Mr. Monday Night himself, Mr. Pay-Per-View, Rob Van Dam. And you got to do the thumb points when you're doing that. You got to point. You got to bring the thumbs
I already
in
hate this list.
and point at yourself every time. Rob Van Dam, the whole fucking show from his ECW days.
So why? So when we're giving our favorite wrestlers, talk a little bit about why you like that particular wrestler.
At the time, because I remember watching him, starting off and just, he was doing things that was like, huh, no one else is doing that. He had the moveset that was distinct and different from everybody else's. Nobody was doing the Rolling Thunder, where somebody lay on the ground, bounce against the ropes, and then roll into them. And it's like, what the fuck is this? And of course, the man has the absolute all-time greatest frog splash in the business. Like, nobody else does a better frog splash than Rob Van Dam. That's why it's the 5-star. The man can turn himself in midair and change direction. I don't know how the fuck he does that, but nobody else can do that.
I'm unfamiliar with this term frog splash. What exactly is a frog splash?
This is going to sound like the stupidest fucking thing when Ronan describes it, but Ronan, go ahead.
So the frog splash is when you go up to the top rope and you leap in the air a la a frog, and more or less you land on the opponent. It's more or less kind of a belly splash, but you're landing
jump off
different.
the rope, and in midair, you do this little jiggle with your arms and legs, which somehow functions as like a power multiplier. This is a sidebar. I want to come back to like shit that even as a kid I thought was fucking stupid in wrestling. So I'll sidebar that for now. Frog Splash is on the fucking list.
Okay, Steve's already getting feisty. He hasn't even started to talk about this shit. He's getting feisty. I love it.
I enjoy this because, Steve is acting all this sucks. I hate all this. I don't know why I'm here. But his anger belies a hidden passion.
It does. There was a time in my life when I fucking loved wrestling, but even then, there was a lot of shit that's fucking stupid.
I agree with Steve, but I'll get back to Rob Van Dam. But this is a thing that occurred with when I would watch WrestleMania and stuff, when it was like me, Frank, and Justin. Removed himself from the island, and it turned to me, Frank, and Craig and Corey watching wrestling.
Fucking Craig,
watching.
Right?
Yeah, fucking Craig.
Okay.
Yeah, watching WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble. So back we eventually we were. Once you watched enough wrestling, you know what's coming. Frank particular, because Frank watched it as a kid. If Frank was still around, he would be the one who you were asking, like, were you ingrained in cult? Frank was. Frank as a kid would go to the local shows, like a Big Frank and Mary would take him to the local shows. That's why Jerry Lawler was God to Frank, because the all-time favorite wrestler for Frank was Jerry Lawler. So, but when you watch enough, you get to understand the tropes of modern wrestling. So he's about to bump the ref. He's going to bump he bumped the ref, and the ref is now unconscious for 12 minutes. It's ridiculous. As Steve was saying, tropes in wrestling that drive you crazy. You're going all in. What the fuck is this bitch doing? So, But Rob Van Dam, an interesting thing about Rob, like an interesting and frustrating thing, is that Rob is actually also an incredibly great technical wrestler that can do the really fast chain wrestling. Matt, you are you're asking about. I'm not familiar with this. If you can find matches between Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn from ECW, the rapid exchange chain wrestling that they could do,
Okay, I will look that up.
It was incredible. Like the downside with RVD is that he wrestles to the level of his opponent. So if he's wrestling somebody like a Jerry Lynn or a Triple H or someone like that, he's wrestling at their level. So you're getting like prime Rob Van Dam. But if he suddenly has a match against somebody stupid like a Spike Dudley or the Hurricane, that quality goes down considerably because I don't know what it is about him. He's just like, I'm not going to outshine this guy. He's just too cool for school, yo. He's not going to do that. So there's my number 5, Rob Van Dam.
Rob Van Dam. All right, and I'm not familiar with that wrestler, so I will put him on the list of wrestlers to take a look at. Steve, you're number 5.
So I need to give a little bit of background. I was primarily a fan during the Monday Night Wars. I watched wrestling a little bit before that, but not a ton. So when I give you this top 5, I pretty much mean the version of them that existed during the Monday Night Wars. When I started watching wrestling in depth, I have this distinct memory from May of 1996, and my little brother comes running into my room and he is yelling, Steve, Razor Ramon is on WCW, and that is what got me big into wrestling from that point forward.
Hey, yo,
Scott
the
Hall.
bad guy.
With that said, some of these you're gonna hear these names and you're gonna think, well, that's fucking stupid. Well, hey, I was a kid during the Monday Night Wars. Number 5 for me is Alex Wright, and I don't even know that I can fully explain why I love Alex Wright so much. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of my favorite wrestlers are favorites because they use moves that I really like.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of really basic moves. So there was a long time where Alex Wright used the German suplex, and I fucking love the German suplex. I have actually given a German suplex to someone in real life, and it's one of the most fun things that I have ever done. He also, at one point in time, used just a very basic neck breaker, and I love shit like that. But I can tell you that for the last 25 years, anytime I have played a wrestling game where there is a create a wrestler function, one of the first things I do is put Monday Night Wars level Alex Wright into that game. I love him, and I'm so thrilled that there's a YouTube channel I love called Wrestling Bios, and they are going week by week through the Monday Night Wars, and there's kind of like a cult following for Alex Wright now for fans of that YouTube channel, and I love it. I'm thrilled that he is kind of getting his due now.
Okay, another wrestler I have not checked out. I will say, you guys are talking about wrestling video games. Are there current wrestling video games that are actually good? Like, would you guys recommend, hey, go get the latest, WWE wrestling game or something like that?
I think the current version that's out is because 3 or 4 years ago they put out one that was so incredibly bad. It was like, Steve's watched stuff like Matt McMuscle, so he's definitely seen what happened about this particular wrestling game that was recent.
Yep.
There's just characters melting into the floor, just dissolving, legs folding up inside of themselves. It was ridiculous. But I believe the current game that's out now is a little bit better. The downside with most of these like any of the WWE games, at least for me, you two haven't played wrestling games in probably 10, Matt never.
I've never
Steve
played
probably
one.
Steve over 10 years. So for you two, it's probably not
true.
a deal.
I actually really love the Fire Pro wrestling games, which use knockoff versions of real wrestlers. Fire Pro is great.
I'm aware of Fire Pro. I've never played it, but I am aware of it. So, okay, I'll rephrase that to WWE wrestling games in probably over 10 years. But they haven't changed. They haven't changed the game engine for these games the move system, and even a lot of the animations in over 10 years.
Is this like an
So-
EA thing? Because they do that
No.
with the Madden games and all that. They don't never change the engines.
No,
The
this-
WWE 2K whatever games are very much the wrestling version of Madden.
Gotcha.
It is very much every year they put out a game that's 95% identical to the previous year's game.
Okay.
yeah. Updated maybe like 50 new moves, and then like, the new wrestlers. I've always stated that like these games, like wrestling games, like football games or whatever, it's like you don't need to buy the yearly version. Just put out like a $20 update pack every year. Here's the new wrestlers. Here's the new stat list or whatever. But yeah, the current wrestling game, I haven't checked the reviews on it. I believe it's better than the last one, but I'm not 100% on that.
Okay.
So Matt,
Okay.
there's a game that you can get on Steam right now. I don't know if I own it on Steam, but I don't know if it's on any of the consoles. It's Fire Pro World. It's Fire Pro something. Fire Pro is the overall name of the series. It looks like a Super Nintendo game because it still uses like almost sprite-based graphics to an extent, but it is fantastic, and it has a bunch of wrestlers, old and new, from all over the world, but they don't license any of them. So if like Scott Hall is in the game, his name would be like Hot Skull, but otherwise he would look identical
okay.
and have all the same moves. It's great.
Okay, I'll check that out. Is it on me? Am I up for number
I think
5?
so.
Okay, my number 5. Now, when I made my list, again, I haven't been exposed to all the wrestlers out there, but I feel like for me anyway, my favorite wrestlers are kind of like when you're like 13 years old and you listen to a few bands for the first time, like that are not your parents' bands that they listen to, and you're like, oh, this is the music I'm gonna love for the rest of my life, because these are the wrestlers that I sort of found. Even 40 years old, I was able to watch matches. I'm like, oh, I like this guy. So my number 5, and I think you guys will like this pick. I think Steve will like this pick. My number 5 is Mick Foley. Through Mankind, Cactus Jack, and Do Love, all the various incarnations of Mick Foley, and the reason why Mick Foley is on my list is because I think the first real sort of full match that I watched was that Hell in a Cell with Undertaker and Mankind when he throws him off that thing, and I remember just being kind of like, I was like, holy shit, like that was kind of like the match that I want to say sort of made me appreciate what wrestlers do and what wrestlers go through, because I think if you're just thinking, oh, it's fake, right? It's the matches are predestined ahead of time, and it's all just kind of a show. But there's there's an artistry to wrestling that I really appreciated with this match, but in particular, Mick Foley, he's not the prettiest wrestler. I will say that. He's not like doing the greatest moves or anything like that, but just his sheer willingness to destroy his body for my entertainment is like, I respect that dude. I respect that dude a lot. So Mick Foley is my number 5, and if I had to pick one of his various characters, again, I'd probably go Mankind, just because I really liked his character in that.
Incorrect. The proper answer is Cactus Jack.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I'm just saying, me personally, I'm just more partial to that kind of the creepy sort of horror psycho sort of thing, and I liked that shtick. And I first saw him really fighting the Undertaker in that match, and that's kind of like the persona I went to. But I think they're all good. That's why I just put Mick Foley in general on here, rather than saying Mankind. All of them, Mankind, Cactus Jack, loved all of them from what I've seen thus far. So my number 5 is Mick Foley for those reasons. So now we go to number 4, Ronan. Who's your 4th favorite wrestler?
Well, my 4th favorite, I mean, it's a classic, it's an icon, it's a staple. You can't really give a top list without somebody mentioning the dirtiest player in the game. Woo! Jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing. Woo, woo! The Nature Boy, Ric Flair. He's just too fucking good. And there's
The
just
airplane sexual harasser, Ric Flair.
But I'm not like I'm not going to vouch for Ric Flair, the man. Just like I'm not going to vouch for Chris Benoit. He's not on the list, but Chris Benoit, yeah, he strangled his wife and kid and then killed himself. Terrible person. Even though most of that was brain damage. Well, crossface and bottled tap water, my favorite. Strangling top. No, but it's like so. Yeah, I can't defend Ric Flair, the man, the human being himself, but the entertainer, the wrestler, is just so fucking enjoyable. It's like, yes, as a person, he's horrible, but as a performer, as a wrestler, I can separate those two. Like the performer was great, and his influence on wrestling, his impact, the fact that so many wrestlers would never have become a thing had Ric Flair not decided to make them look good. Because
that's fair. I'm pretty sure of my top 5, there's only one of them that probably isn't a complete bag of dicks in real life.
Yep. So, I lost a train of thought there. But yeah, a lot of wrestlers seem to be, except for, I can actually say this, that I met Mick Foley. I got a picture with Mick Foley.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he came here for a book signing. Scooter, and I have that book somewhere with his autograph. Obviously everyone who went there asked him wrestling questions. No one asked him about the book. But yeah, Mick Foley, great writer, great author, wrote a bunch of children's books and stuff too. But so yeah, back to Ric Flair. As I was saying, Rick graced a lot of wrestlers by this. I say deciding to lose for them. That sounds bad, but for example,
and that's putting them over, right? Is that what that terminology is?
Yeah, when you put somebody over is when you do a match for them, and you make them look good, as to and also it's they use your prestige, you beat Ric Flair.
Gotcha.
That was a big deal in the 70s and 80s. And it's arguable that Ric Flair made fucking Sting. Ric Flair with the Horsemen, and the Horsemen made the Midnight Express or the LOD. It's a lot of wrestlers in singles and tag teams and groups. They all got better by Ric Flair, being a straight up homie for them. Yeah, sure, we'll do this match. I'll make you look good, because nobody took an ass whooping like Ric Flair.
Okay. Steve, you like Ric Flair?
Nope. I mean, I recognize that Ric Flair is this was this incredibly talented performer. I never cared about Ric Flair matches. He was before my generation. He was before my interest in wrestling. I started watching during the Monday Night Wars, and while Ric Flair was there, the start of the Monday Night Wars was Ric Flair losing a lot, and so he never hooked me.
Yeah. What I do find interesting about a lot of these wrestlers, especially the old-time ones, is many of them have their own sort of YouTube shows. Ric Flair has a podcast. Who's that? There's another dude. I'm blanking on his name right now. But watching those, just hearing them talk about the weird stories and their takes on crazy things that happened, big events throughout there's a guy named Conrad Thompson. I don't know if you guys know him, but he has a podcast with Jim Ross, and there's hundreds of episodes of just Jim Ross talking about everything that happened and what was happening backstage and what the wrestlers were actually like and things of that nature. So my point is, Ric Flair's sucks. It's not good. It's the least interesting one that I've seen thus far. So, okay, Ric Flair, number 4. Steve, we're going to you. Your 4th favorite wrestler.
There's an echo again.
I hear no echo on my end.
I hear
it's you.
Oh, well, it's going through my headset. What do you want from me? I got my headset on.
1, 2, 3. All right, it's gone. I don't know what happened there, but it's gone. This is just objectively a terrible answer, and I am prepared for whatever hate I get. I love Kevin Nash, and I don't give a shit what other people.
He's the guy
I
that does
don't.
the other podcast. That's who I was trying to think of, Kevin Nash.
I'm sure he's terrible at it because he's a terrible wrestler. But I like my fandom for Kevin Nash. Like he became a big deal at just the right time for me. Like there was a time where I suddenly started really liking like the giant wrestlers, Kevin Nash, the Giant himself, Paul White. And so again, I many of the wrestlers that I liked because of their moves, and so I, for whatever reason, fucking loved the power bomb, and so I had a giant wrestler that used the power bomb, and that just connected with me.
He wasn't even good with it. There was no energy when he did it. He just dropped you.
Like Kevin Nash famously has like 6 moves or 5 moves or whatever Jim Cornette said, and one of them was a terrible power bomb. I can't even explain why I love Kevin Nash, but I was always so fucking excited to watch him wrestle, even though he was objectively terrible in the ring.
Has he ever been able to bend his knees? Because anytime he walks, his legs move like straight sticks. Steve, can you confirm, has Kevin Nash ever moved his goddamn knees?
I mean, probably once or twice in his life. I mean, he power bombed the fucking Giant, and it looks amazing. It's the only time he hit a good power bomb. I can't explain my love for Kevin Nash. Feel free to send me hate mail.
Okay. So we're at my number 4. And my number 4 is something that you guys have patiently been waiting for quite some time. And
God damn it.
Are you ready to be underwhelmed, Steve?
I am ready to be properly underwhelmed.
So this particular wrestler has my personal favorite move.
Yeah, we need the backstory about why we are so excited / not excited to hear this.
Well, I don't know if there's much of a backstory so much as we were talking about various wrestlers. I just happened to say, like, oh, there's a wrestler from the 80s and 90s who has a move. I let you guys know is like a punch. And I was like, I just love this move. And I said it's basic. I said you guys were not going to be impressed with it, but you guys were trying to figure out who this wrestler could possibly be that I love this move so much. And none of you got it, but I'm going to reveal it now. So my number 4 favorite wrestler is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Money, 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 money. Now, he does a fist drop. So try to Google
$1 million fist drop.
Try to, I guess, Google. I mean, I saw it on YouTube. This was in my fever dream in December when I was watching all these things. But basically, he just winds up for this punch, and he throws himself off and just slams the fist directly in the face. So he never actually extends his arm out. He basically, he like cocks his arm back and just jumps down and slams it right into the person's face, and I love it. It's basic, it's simple, but I don't see any other wrestlers doing it.
There's a reason for that.
Well, maybe. And like I said, you guys might not think it's cool at all, but I personally love that move. And so the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, I love his... Okay, so one of the big things that I really enjoy about wrestlers from the 80s and 90s is that they actually had characters. Like, it wasn't, I watched the Royal Rumble for the first time this year. It's like, okay, here comes Seth Rollins, or here comes whoever, and it's like, these aren't characters. These are just buff dudes with long hair, with a shitty intro song. But I love that in the back in the day, at least in the 80s, 90s, these wrestlers actually had like hooks and gimmicks to them, and I love the $1 Million Man's gimmick. I love that he's trying to buy the world championship. I love that he's just throwing cash around. There's this great clip of him like kicking a ball away from a little kid when he's like, hey, yeah, I'll give you all this money if you can dribble this 10 times in a row, or he just kicks it out, and that amazing laugh. He's a great villain. He's got my personal favorite move. And I think there's a video called like Top 10 Ted DiBiase moves on YouTube, and I think it's number 7 on that list. But if you watch the all 10, they're all cool. I think they're all really, really cool. But number 7, that fist drop, is my favorite. So that's my number 4, $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Do any of
I
you
like
have a
Million
problem
Dollar
with Ted
Man.
DiBiase? Okay.
No,
see,
Million Dollar Man is good.
Steve,
I-
you were
I
concerned,
just-
Steve, that my list was gonna like pain you here, and we're on the same
No,
page so far.
I was trying to see like you hyped up this punch.
I did
and we're like,
not hype it up.
Ronan,
there
he
was a
hyped
lot
up
of
this
hype.
punch.
There was
He
a lot
hyped
of
up
hype.
this punch. He hyped up this punch. I thought
No.
but no, I like the Million Dollar. I remember back when I was an idiot child and I would occasionally watch wrestling. I fucking loved Money Incorporated
Yes.
as a tag team. Give me Ted DiBiase and IRS all fucking day long.
It's so good. He's just so good. I think when he went to, was it WCW, he became like $1 billion Ted or something like that.
he got affiliated with NWO and it did not work out
he
well
was
for
their
him.
he was their financier in the early
Yeah.
days. He was the one who was buying all the NWO ads and stuff. It's like, okay, this makes sense. Yeah, it's like within the logic of storytelling. It's like, okay, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah. I like him. I think he's a great villain. One of the best wrestling villains, in my opinion. So that's my number 4. So, Ronan, we'll go to you for number 3.
All right, so my number 3, like this one could say that this one's a little too kind of like, oh, boo, you know what? But so my number 3 pick is going to be Triple H. Triple H is just
Mr. Sledgehammer, eh?
Mr. Yeah, well, it's not so much a sledgehammer so much as it is a bouncing hammer.
That's true.
If you ever watched him, like, use that against somebody, for starters, he always has his hand cupped over the tip of it
Yeah.
when he, does whatever. And then when he drops it, the fucking thing bounces like 6 goddamn times. It's like, I've never encountered, metal that bounces like that. But so like Triple H, he catches a lot of flack and heat now just because, like, oh, well, he married into the business. He did all this stuff behind the scenes. It's one of his things that he used to say when he would cut promos was he would refer to himself like people hate me because I'm just that damn good. And it's true. He really was that good. Everything he did was technically precise. He had like great ring presence. He always knew where he was in the ring, how to get where he needed to go. And whenever he needed to fuck up for the match to continue on or something, if you saw him go onto the ring apron, go up the rope, you knew something horrible was going to happen because I don't think he's ever successfully jumped off the rope. But occasionally, every now and then, he would try it, and then bad things would happen. You always knew it. It was one of those. It was one of those telegraph things, like when Ric Flair would start to beg somebody not to, on his knees groveling before he would just hit you with the low blow.
Well, Triple H is so large. Like, he's such a huge. I mean, in his prime when he was fully roided up, it was bad to go on the top ropes when he's that big.
Yeah. I mean, although Brock Lesnar, somebody who is bigger than that, used to do the shooting star press. I say
and
used
then
to.
there was one time where he never did it again.
Exactly. And you watch that, and it's just like, man, Brock would have absolutely landed that had he pulled Kurt 2 feet closer, because he completely fucked up. But yeah. So I've heard Jim Cornette has oftentimes referred to Triple H as he wasn't the best guy ever, but he was the guy that had the matches with the best guys ever. And that's an important role to have because the best guys ever, they need a great bad guy to go up against, and that was always Triple H because he's just the best at being a bad guy.
Yeah, and he's big, right? He was the biggest of all the scary until Brock Lesnar came along, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he was huge, but at the same time, like The Rock, when in his heyday, The Rock for a certain period got fucking gigantic too. So it's I can't so much say that he was the biggest muscular. I've never whenever Triple H would flex, his bicep didn't have a bicep on it, it's like Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner's muscles would flex.
Yeah. There's a clip of both of them doing it at the same time or something, and Scott Steiner just looks like a monster. He doesn't look like no human being should look like that.
No, they should not. He's got this weird chest gap now. I'm not sure what it's like. He got some kind of injury. Now when he flexes, there's this noticeable gap between his pecs. And it's some kind of like a muscle spasm thing.
Oh, I was
Like,
watching.
not that you would want to, but if you laid down, you could eat soup out of that thing.
I was watching a video about injuries that wrestlers get, and I think what's that? Kofi Kingston guy has the same thing. If you look at him, his chest muscles has a gap. Over time, I guess, doing so much wrestling, it just rips some muscle off of like your sternum or something, and it'll leave like gaps and stuff like that. So maybe that happened with him. But okay, number 3, Triple H. Interesting choice. Steve, you're number 3.
My number 3 is Billy Gunn, and he's another guy that I was a big DX fan during the Monday Night Wars. Now looking back, I realize that whole faction was just fucking stupid. But I was a big DX fan after Shawn Michaels left, and it became Triple H and Chyna and the New Age Outlaws and X-Pac. But I remember, I'm a big fan of certain moves, and so I loved Billy Gunn's Famouser, like that. Basically, a bulldog, but with his leg over your head instead of holding your head. I loved that move, and I remember, DX. I feel like they never actually stuck around as long as they actually stuck around in my head. But when DX ended, Triple H became a bad guy. He turned heel. But I still really loved the faction, even though it didn't exist anymore. I wanted to keep rooting for these people, and for whatever reason, post DX, Billy Gunn was the former DX member that I really latched onto. I also think he's probably the only one on my list that is actually still actively involved in wrestling at this point. But I love Billy Gunn. I love the Famouser. When he switched his gimmick to be the One, I really enjoyed his Cobra Clutch slam that he used. He just, when I wanted to continue to root for a member of DX after DX broke up, he was my pick, and I stuck with him pretty much until I stopped watching wrestling.
I think that's fair. Another wrestler that I haven't really had a chance to watch many matches of, but I will look him up as well. Billy Gunn.
Mr. Ass. That's his name.
I'm an ass man.
He has amazing yet terrible entrance music, and I fucking love it. I'm an ass man.
It's going to require too much fucking editing, but you really do need to add in the theme music when we cut to adding in the theme music to this episode when we give somebody's because we keep doing it. We keep bumping in, at least Steve and I will do the themes. You're fucking lame. You aren't doing any themes.
I mean, wow, that hurts. That hurts. Shit.
How dare you not have this encyclopedic knowledge of Monday Night Wars theme songs, Matt?
I know, right?
God damn it.
Okay.
You take your fucking worm brain, all this knowledge you've dedicated to horror movies and shit, you take some of that away, and you put wrestling in there.
I'm only 2 months into my wrestling fandom. Give me a
I
break.
don't want to hear it. You son of a bitch, you put it in there.
Ronan just turned heel on me real quick there, and I was not expecting
and you deal with that shame.
Jeez. Okay, so I'm going to go for my number 3. And again, I think this is a wrestler that we can all agree on. I think that this wrestler might be on all of our lists when everything's all said and done. The Macho Man, Randy Savage, is my number 3.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah!
I love... how can you not like the Macho Man, Randy Savage? My fiance, she does not watch wrestling. Even she said, that's the only wrestler I like, that Macho Man guy with the Slim Jims. That's who I like.
Step into it!
Yeah. So his promos are incredible. His style was incredible. Just watching a lot of those old videos with him and Hulk Hogan with the mega powers, all that. I mean, it's so good, and it makes me really disappointed that like Vince McMahon just kind of fired all these people in 1993, and we didn't get like to keep a lot of these wrestlers going for a little bit longer than they did in the WWF at that time. But yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage, there's nothing I dislike about this guy. Even my number one, we'll get to it, but I'm not sure I like some of this stuff. But with Macho Man, I'm just like, dude, I just love everything this guy is all about and what he's doing. He's entertaining, and I think, to me as a new sort of wrestling sort of fan, the entertainment aspect of it is what really sort of drew me in. And he is an entertainer par excellence. So Macho Man Randy Savage is my number 3.
It's a solid pick. I don't know how long we're going to keep doing this episode after we've done the number ones, but there's just I don't know, maybe Steve and I, once we're finished up with this, we should recommend insane promos for you to watch.
Yeah.
Because there are some doozies out there, and I think most of them would come from Macho Man, the Iron Sheik, or of course the Ultimate Warrior, the king of incoherent rambling.
Ultimate Warrior's promos are so funny. They are so fucking funny. But okay, well, Ronan, you're number 2. Let's keep it moving. Who's your number 2?
All right, my number 2, up until maybe about 6-7-ish years ago or so, right up to the point where I stopped this goes into number 1, but up until a while ago, this number 2 was my number 1 pick. And this is where Steve starts. This is where Steve will turn on me, and then eventually he'll turn on you, as he oftentimes does.
I feel like he's already turned on you.
I already know Matt's number 1, and it's stupid.
You don't.
My number 2 pick is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, going into the corner, tuning up the band with the sweet chin music. What Shawn was essentially the modern representation of Ric Flair. Because Shawn, a lot of the things that Shawn did was straight lifted from Ric Flair's playbook. If you slammed down Shawn, he would oversell it by kind of leaping forward, acting dazed, and then falling down. That was a Ric Flair thing, and like you said, he would do that. And I understand, 90s Shawn Michaels was a complete and utter dickbag, and Shawn Michaels himself will admit to this, and probably give himself all the same hate that you would give him. As I mentioned with Ric Flair, I'm separating the person from the wrestler. Shawn, he was a terrible fucking dickbag in the 90s, but he was also, probably up until Stone Cold, the single best entertainer in wrestling up until that point. And he then he went away for a while. He had the legit back injury and then had to deal with a bunch of drug issues. Came back and remarkably was still fucking great. Came back to have a match with Triple H. I've got that on DVD somewhere around here. And it came out great. And then his next match was in the Elimination Chamber, and he won the title after not being there for 5 fucking years. So Shawn Michaels, one of the greatest entertainers ever, and huge dickbag for a good chunk of his professional career.
There is a documentary
that Shawn Michaels was actually injured all those times.
Well, there's a documentary on WWE for Shawn Michaels, and to your point, Ron, he admits he's yeah, I was out of control in the 90s. Cocaine's a hell of a drug, so to speak. So yeah, okay, number 2, Shawn Michaels.
Shawn's the only I would never. I can't think of any person where I would actually say this.
How do I keep? Hold on. I keep busting, and I don't even realize that I'm doing it. I keep busting out this game.
I've taken all of your money, so.
Oh shit! I'm not even paying attention.
Don't worry, it's safe with Steve with his giant mountain of fucking chips. But I forgot what I was about to. For starters, any kind of documentary that you're watching, WWE officially licensed ones, you're mostly watching history as Vince.
It's been rewritten.
Its history as Vince McMahon would like you to think it was. A good chunk of it is fake, and they go out of their way to omit all the bad shit that the company particularly Vince McMahon, who may or may not have helped, some wrestlers murder people and then get away with it.
Allegedly. I don't want to get sued by Vince McMahon. Allegedly.
Oh yeah, Vince.
Okay.
He's totally gonna. That's totally gonna happen. He's
So your number
he's fine
2
sometime.
is Shawn Michaels. Steve, who's your second favorite wrestler?
We've already talked about him. I fucking love Macho Man Randy Savage. The flying elbow drop is one of the all-time greatest fucking finishing moves. There is no debating this. It is so fucking good. Every once in a while, I will go back and watch his first match in the WWF, and he's fighting this stupid little scrawny jobber guy. And Macho Man is so dedicated to ruining this fucking guy. He downs him, and he goes up to the top rope, and he jumps off, and he hits the fucking elbow drop. This guy is fucking dead. Like, people are reading his will and thinking about the life insurance they're going to get. Macho Man doesn't care. He goes up to the top rope again and hits another fucking flying elbow, and then he pins him. I love everything about Macho Man. He was probably a piece of shit outside the ring. But like we said, sometimes you can compartmentalize. I love Macho Man. It's just that I'm such a fan of everything that he does, and I'm also sad because again I'm reliving the war on wrestling bios, and I'm at the point where I am basically witnessing the end of his career, and it makes me sad.
Oh, well, you can't forget about that, like, historically great run he had in TNA. You can't forget about that, Steve.
Yeah, see, there's a Randy Savage match where I think he's in the middle of like a multi-man match, and like he punches Jeff Jarrett in the head and then pins him. That should be the punch that Matt focuses on as the all-time greatest punch.
I'm not saying that Ted DiBiase had the greatest punch of all time.
Get really fucking defensive there, Matt.
I'm just saying
I mean, you're not
that
hitting
move.
it with the amount of hype that you've been hitting it with for months
I did not
now.
hype this up. I told
There
you
was a
guys
lot of
you're
fucking
not.
hype.
I was like, you're gonna be underwhelmed by this. It's not gonna be that cool. To me, it's just a cool move. Fuck you.
Matt was like, you were going to rethink your life when I tell you about this match.
Lies and slander. Okay, so
I want to add on to Macho Man real quick. It's
Sure.
like Steve was talking about how the elbow drop is the greatest. Like it's one of the greatest, and not only that, Macho Man's specifically is the greatest ever. You watch anybody else try to do that, and they fail. They fail miserably. Nobody does it like Randy Savage. There was a fucking reason they had him do it in Spider-Man. Like, that's what you're known for. You're going to get up there, and you're going to fucking elbow drop. Bonesaw is ready. And just the voice alone.
Oh, his voice is great.
You watch Cartoon Network in the 90s, and then like you're watching Dexter's Laboratory. Here's an episode of Monkey, and then suddenly Randy Savage is there. And it's just yeah, exactly. I will spare your planet Earth. Oh yeah, fucking amazing.
Well, we were talking about like how characters we'd love to see in Fortnite. I would love to run around in Fortnite in a Randy Macho Man Savage
I
game
would
with like
100% be Macho
100%.
Squad if they do that.
with like the what are those things that hang off of his arms and stuff? Like as you're running around. Yeah, the tassels. That'd be awesome. That'd be so cool. Every time you kill someone, it's like, oh yeah, that'd be amazing. Make it happen, Fortnite. Come on.
His weapon, his harvesting tool would of course be a Slim Jim.
The marketing is just incredible here. I mean, come on, Vince, you're back in the WWE.
We
Make
want
this
to
happen.
give you money.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know like if that would be a WWE thing or if that would be like his family that you'd have to go to get that likeness.
Oh, I'm sure WWE. I'm sure Vince owns the rights to his likeness. You don't think that Vince McMahon would have made them sign their souls over for any contract?
He used to do that.
Well, no,
with them,
because Macho Man got to be Macho Man when he went to WCW.
That's a good fucking point. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Though, of course, Vince bought WCW, and Randy Savage's career was basically over at that point, so who fucking knows?
That's true.
He was still Macho. Well, actually, no, I don't know if he was Macho Man his limited time in TNA or if they just called him Randy Savage.
Sidebar, real quick. One of my favorite things about Macho Man Randy Savage has nothing at all to fucking do with wrestling. I'm remembering back to 2012, and there was some religious group that was predicting that the end of the world was going to happen on some random day in 2012, and Macho Man died like the week before, and suddenly, like, everyone's social media is flooded with fucking memes of Macho Man fucking atomic elbow dropping Jesus and all of these deities. Like, Macho Man died to save us from the apocalypse. I love Randy Savage. That was one of the funniest fucking times to be alive on social media.
It's true. It's true.
My favorite thing that pops into memory of my favorite Macho Man moment is one of his promos, and he's talking. I don't know who he's talking to. Maybe it's Mean Gene or somebody, but he's like, Macho Man, I heard you went to a therapist. He's like, oh yeah, I went to a lady therapist. She diagnosed me with OCD. One cool dude. The green weather frog rises to the top. It's so good. It's so good. And he even has a really cool. I know, Steve, you're not on social media anymore, but and I don't know if you're aware of this, but Macho Man actually went viral. Gosh, I want to say like a year or two. It's got to be 2 years. I want to say right when COVID sort of started. He went viral for a while. There was like a clip of him, and I guess he was on. I don't know if it was Arsenio Hall show or something like that, but Arsenio Hall asked him something about crying. He's like, does the Macho Man ever cry? And
I know this clip.
Yeah, and he's actually like, well, yeah, I do cry. It's okay for people to cry, and people were like,
it's okay for a man to cry. Sometimes you got to get emotional.
Yeah, and so that was actually going around as sort of like a way for people to be like, see, even the Macho Man says it's okay to cry, which is just kind of a cool thing.
I take all of my life lessons from Macho Man Randy Savage. Nothing in the world. There's no problem so big that you can't beat it with a flying elbow drop.
When Randy Savage died, God, this was when Sleepy Cast was in its early infancy days, and so Macho Man Randy Savage dies, and so Frank and I are like, well, we have to honor him somehow, and so this is when we created the gimmick of Frank making a machine that allows us to talk to Ghost out of bullshit from his shed, and thus Ghost of Macho Man was born. And we would just randomly through our show, like random episodes, just have like random Macho Man type segments. It's like, oh yeah, well there's the Macho Man coming in. He's haunting the house now.
Macho Man's great, absolutely great.
Macho Man's great. Everyone should love Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah,
everyone should check out his music career.
I don't know about that.
Hulk Hogan,
Macho Man, noted rapper releasing the album "Be a Man," where he calls out Hulk Hogan. One of my favorite like reviews of all time is some brave, brilliant motherfucker out there reviewed the Macho Man rap album, and his like single sentence review was like, defies the laws of physics by blowing and sucking at the same time.
Yeah, I listened to a couple tracks of that, and I turned it off. I was like, I don't want to remember Macho Man like this.
You can't sell it. Like he had some song back in the '80s. Vince had this great idea for like some of his performers to do like these weird songs where they would sing them, and so there is an '80s Macho Man song too where he's singing in it. Like, more singing is a poor choice. It's people singing in the background. He's talking over them. I am the Macho Man. I am your friend. I'm Randy Savage. It's like while people in the background just kind of go, it's the Macho Man. It was wonderful stuff. What the fuck is that guy wearing?
I don't know what he's wearing.
We cannot allow that to pass.
The two identical cowboys are leaving.
They realize it too. What the fuck? This Ninja Turtle villain looking motherfucker.
Okay, so I'm going to get to my number two. My number two is one of the wrestlers I actually distinctly remember from way back when I had that babysitter and I was flipping through the WWF magazines. And this was a wrestler who, again, I started watching his matches, and I'm like, I just like all of this stuff. One of the few big, giant, tall wrestlers on my list, I think. And that's The Undertaker. It might be sort of cliche. I don't know if Undertaker's considered, passe.
Hang on, guys. Are you guys in this game? Or are you planning on betting?
I'm going to fold.
All right, then I'm going all in on a 7-2 offsuit.
Godspeed, friend. Godspeed. So yeah, The Undertaker. I just like his whole shtick. Yeah, it can get really goofy at times in the '90s. His weird little coven of evil and trying to crucify
The Ministry.
The Ministry, trying to crucify Stephanie McMahon and all that gets a little goofy and hokey. But in terms of like sheer like presence in the ring, I think Undertaker is really hard to beat. Just sort of slowly stalking around the ring, and he's got all kinds of cool, interesting moves. They're not the flashiest, but they are just awesome. Like, it's cool when he does the Tombstone Pile Driver. Doesn't matter how many times he does it to somebody. It's just cool every single time. All the Hell in the Cells are cool. The casket matches. Of course, he had Paul Bearer for a long time. His manager,
yeah!
So cool. I mean, and I think I was actually watching, and maybe it was Jim Ross who was saying that Vince McMahon considers The Undertaker his greatest creation ever. Because I guess that was a Vince McMahon thing. He wanted, he came up with the idea for the character and everything, and really made him flourish. But yeah, The Undertaker, he just seems like a good dude. And his matches are some of my favorite matches that I've seen. And yeah, Undertaker's my number 2. So there you go. Now we're getting to the...
Corey would approve. Yeah, Undertaker is Corey's favorite wrestler. It's just watching Corey lunge over to strangle Frank when Brock Lesnar beat him at WrestleMania because Frank started talking shit.
That was bullshit. Brock Lesnar should not have beat him. That streak should be undefeated.
But like Undertaker wanted that streak to have ended. Like every WrestleMania, like from my understanding, is Undertaker would more or less go to Vince and be like, "So how about we take it down this time, brother?" Yeah, but I know he really wanted Kane to be the one who broke it at one point. Then he thought that it should have been Randy Orton. It's like, yeah, this kid's got it. He needs to be the one. It needs to go to him. And his match with CM Punk at WrestleMania was the one where Undertaker was like, okay, yeah, this kid's legit. He won me over. But Vince was like, no, it has to be Brock Lesnar. We're gonna turn him into a. And that match sucked. If that match was good, I don't think it would have been nearly as shocking. But we weren't paying attention to it. We just heard 1, 2, and we're just talking. Then we hear 3, and the room got fucking silent. Just the ring got silent because it's like, what? Because it was out of nowhere, and again, it sucked. It's just, that's not what it should have ended. And Frank starts laughing, talking shit to Corey, and Corey lunges forward and strangles him.
Well, and the interesting thing, and maybe if the listeners like us talking about our top 5 wrestlers, maybe in the future we'll visit our top 5 most hated wrestlers. But I do not like Brock Lesnar at all. I feel if the Undertaker is gonna lose to some sort of modern wrestler or something, why wouldn't it be John Cena or somebody that's beloved? I don't know. Is Brock Lesnar beloved by the wrestling fan base?
At this point,
I might not know.
I don't. This is the point now where I don't really follow it. But my understanding, just from listening Jim Cornette, is that Brock's one of the only guys Vince has that can actually get tickets to move for a live show or move a pay-per-view buyout. Is Brock? He doesn't have anyone else that can generate those numbers, with the exception of Brock. The downside with Brock that a lot of people hate is that he is like a part-time champion. He'll show up, win a match, and then disappear for 3 months. And his only presence on the show is Paul Heyman, which we need to have a whole separate discussion or episode about greatest mouthpieces in wrestling, because undeniably Paul Heyman is the single best talk man in the business. Nobody talks better shit than Paul Heyman, the greatest of all time. Jimmy Hart's good, but he ain't Paul Heyman.
The mouth from the South. I like him a lot.
Jimmy's good, but Paul is better.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get to it. Number one. We've been waiting patiently now. Ronan, your number one favorite wrestler of all time.
All right, like Matt doesn't know. Matt doesn't know enough people. Steve is sort of like, all right, well, he got the annoying one out of the way. Who the fuck could it be now? I doubt you're not going to know who it is. So my number one favorite pick, he was a local small-time indie wrestler here in Memphis. Never really got too far, but it was the moveset always intrigued me. Just a great personality, little guy. Nobody really heard of him. Named Steve Eaton. Just a great fucking wrestler here.
What? Huh.
No, I kid. No, I kid. Although Steve did wrestle here for a bit, but my all-time favorite pick now.
What was your ring name, Steve? I need to know. What was your ring name?
The Assassin.
Nice.
But so no, as I said, my number one used to be Shawn Michaels, until a new guy came around, and when he left, that's more or less when I stopped watching too. I checked out when CM Punk left, because CM Punk is the best in the world, the fucking greatest guy, great at all the things, great technical wrestler, one of the all-time best who could talk shit in the promo, get the crowd to hate him, get the crowd to love him. The CM Punk was he had everything. He was the perfect package. He was so great. And he also had that mindset of one of the guys from the Territory days, where if the promoter, if the booker was giving him shit, he had no problem going up to somebody like a Triple H or Vince McMahon and telling them that they were stupid, or Triple H trying to get him to have a WrestleMania match with him, where CM Punk's like, I don't need to wrestle you to look good. You need to wrestle me to look good, and just stopping the whole, just sucking the air out of the room, telling Triple H that. CM Punk. Fucking great, all-time champ.
Not impressed.
Nah, CM Punk. I don't know. I've seen some of his matches. Maybe I haven't seen the right ones. Send me some links to some CM
His
Punk
finishing move is fucking stupid.
Yeah, well, I was not a fan of the GTF. It became a joke between me and Frank at every WrestleMania. Because Frank was like, this is the one where he's going to do the Pepsi plunge. It's he's not going to do the fucking Pepsi plunge, Frank. He's not going to fucking do it. It's a pedigree from the top rope. He's not going to do it. But that was Frank's running gag, was that every WrestleMania was going to be the one where CM Punk would do the Pepsi plunge, which was something he used to do in the indie scene, which was a pedigree from the top rope.
Okay. Well, Steve, you're number one.
Bret the Hitman Hart, the Pink and Black Attack. Not gonna lie, one of the things that drew me to Bret Hart originally, when I knew fuck all about wrestling, was the fact that he wore pink. Growing up, I loved the color pink. I still love the color pink. And so now I've got this top tier wrestler that's out there in fucking black and pink with a goddamn flaming heart skull on his outfit. I loved him. But then I watched him. It's like, holy shit, this guy is actually good. This guy's
the real deal
in the ring. And the big thing that made me a Bret Hart fan forever is even though I love DX, even though they were originally supposed to be heels, and I love the NWO, even though they were the bad guys, Bret Hart was the first good guy that I loved that I continued to love after he became the bad guy. Bret Hart legitimately changed the way that I looked at heroes and villains in all forms of media. Because Bret Hart was a good guy for the longest time, and he had that run where he just kept getting fucked over again and again and again. The bad guys kept cheating and cheating and cheating and winning and winning, winning, and he was finally and they were getting cheered. Fans were cheering for bad guys to cheat against Bret Hart, and Bret Hart's like, you know what? Fuck it. I am tired of getting fucked over. I am going to become a bad guy. And so when Bret Hart's heel turn happened, that was the first time that I looked at a bad guy in any form of media and I thought, you know what? He's got a fucking point. Love Bret Hart.
He makes a strong case. He's got a good argument.
I'm not even kidding. Like before Bret Hart's heel turn, like when I watched a movie or cartoon or anything with good guys and bad guys, like it was always like the morality was always very black and white. The good guy was always 100% good. The bad guy was always 100% bad. And then Bret Hart's heel turn happened, and I thought, you know what? For the first time, maybe the bad guy has a point.
Okay. Well, I will say, now that
Fuck
we're
yourself.
here at my number, at number one here, I will say, Steve, that I've watched a lot of Bret Hart matches. He's great. I'm not gonna put Bret Hart down at all. I think he's a fine wrestler. He's a deserved Hall of Fame wrestler. But he's not Shawn Michaels. He is not. He is not the headliner. He is not the icon, the main event, the showstopper, and he's
I'm
not.
about to leave this fucking table.
And he is not known as Mr. WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels. Now, what the funny story behind this is I didn't even really realize that Bret Hart was Steve's favorite wrestler when I started watching wrestling a couple months ago. And I started getting into, it was probably through Undertaker and Mankind, all these things. Somehow Shawn Michaels stuff started popping up in my YouTube feed. So I started watching it, and I'm like, this guy's fucking amazing. Like, he is amazing in the ring. He had incredible music, which I think you even agree, Steve. He's got incredible intro
No, he
music.
has amazing music, but they need to remix it to actually be like Shawn Michaels' actual real life being. Like, I'm just a piece of shit.
But Shawn Michaels has, without question, some of the greatest matches in history. And I know Bret Hart has great matches, but nothing I have watched. I've watched a lot of Jim Ross, Jim Cornette. Jim Cornette talks a lot of shit about Shawn Michaels, but he also says the guy's fucking great. Like, he's like all-time top tier. I kind of look at Shawn Michaels as kind of like Michael Jordan. Bret Hart is like Karl Malone. Yeah, Karl Malone scored more points than Michael Jordan, but who gives a shit? Everyone knows Michael Jordan was superior. And I will always have the fact that Shawn Michaels essentially ended Bret Hart's career.
Yes, you will. Everything that I hate about Shawn Michaels is due to Shawn Michaels behind the scenes. Like, Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon shot Bret Hart's career in the head. WCW put it on life support, and Bill Goldberg pulled the fucking plug.
But he's so good.
Bill, like, in fairness to Bill, it's like
he was amazing in the ring. I cannot fault anything Shawn Michaels does when he's actually in the ring. And you know what? I'm very happy that like 10 years later, supposedly, Bret and Shawn like made amends. Like there's like Bret Hart comes back to Raw like for the first time in 12 years. And Shawn Michaels comes out, they talk, they hug, and according to both of them, that was a legitimate reconciliation. I'll never forgive you, Shawn. Fuck you, Shawn.
Steve turning Canadian right now.
Sweet chin music is incredible. It's an incredible finishing move. And like his match at WrestleMania 25 and 26 with Undertaker, it's incredible. It's like, you watch, like, again, Bret Hart's a great wrestler, but I don't even think they're in the same category in terms of wrestling ability, in terms of just, showmanship and putting on an entertaining match. I mean, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels have had amazing entertaining matches. Like that Iron Man match? It was like 60 minutes long or something like that. That's all great. But Shawn Michaels, he has an amazing finisher, an all-time finishing move. He's got amazing presence. I know you don't like Degeneration X really anymore, but you could argue he was in one of the greatest stables ever. He came back after that huge layoff and continued to have amazing matches all the way through. He quote effectively ended Ric Flair's career. That was a great match. He's just, to me, he is the ultimate wrestler. And when I was watching all this stuff, I'm just like, This guy, he's got the cockiness, he's got the brashness. You know, every wrestling match is predetermined, except the one that wasn't, and Shawn Michaels won it. So there we go.
Everything you're saying is correct. The reasons I hate Sean are all from behind the scenes.
Well, that's my number one.
I also need to make an addendum. You said something incorrect. How it's like, oh, well, Sean effectively ended Ric Flair's career. Actually, after Sean
going,
beat it,
right?
after Sean beat him at WrestleMania, which should have been Ric's last match, he went on to TNA to have another like 40 or some odd just fucking garbage, awful.
That's why I said effectively. I said effectively ended his career, not
he
not
ended
that he
the portion of Ric Flair's career that mattered.
Yeah. Oh, and I think Jim Ross. I've been watching a lot of Jim Ross YouTube videos talking about Shawn Michaels and in the '90s and how difficult he was behind the scenes and everything like that. And that war between WCW and WWE is really interesting because basically WCW took off when Shawn Michaels became the world champion, but all of his friends, whatever, went over and they started getting all the ratings, and that sent him down to a more, downward spiral of drugs and shittiness. But what I will say, that I think he should be given a lot of credit for like cleaning up his act, and he came back as like an actual good, changed human being. I watched an interview with Undertaker, and the Undertaker was like, I hated Shawn Michaels in the 90s. He's like, I wanted to beat his ass like every fucking night. I hated Shawn Michaels. He's like, when he came back, we became, basically like best friends. He's like an amazing dude. So, and I know he found, religion and Jesus and stuff like that. And I think you mentioned it, Ronan, when we were talking one day. It seemed to have actually worked. It seems to be like a genuine thing where he actually turned into a good person. So even if you took away Shawn Michaels' 90s stuff, like I love when he kicks Marty Jannetty through the barbershop glass. That's fucking great. That's such an amazing heel turn. It's so memorable. But even if you discounted all of that, I think even his 2000s run would put him as one of the greatest of all time. And even Ric Flair himself said that he considers Shawn Michaels the greatest wrestler of all time. And Ric Flair has a little bit of an ego, so that's saying something. So to me, the showstopper, HBK, the Heartbreak Kid, that's my number one all-time favorite wrestler. And that's it. Is there anything else you guys wanted to chat about now that our top fives are over?
Well, when I was talking about Sean, it slipped my mind because there was a point there where I was like, what was I talking about? What you mentioned just now, it's like coming from me, this ought to say something, especially with my mindset on how like religion poisons everything. Sean is the only exception to that rule that I can think of because he's the only person I can think of where religion actually made him better. Everyone else, it almost always makes them just like royal pricks. It makes them so much worse in some way. It didn't do that to Sean.
Blanket statement, Ronan.
It didn't do that to Sean. So, and especially considering how wrestling is full of guys who would go on to become like born again Christians. Like Jake Roberts is pretty infamous for doing that like every couple of weeks to try and rebuild his image. Maybe Road Warrior Hawk. Because he became like a born again Christian, but unfortunately then he died like a year or so later. Just all the drugs he did just caught up with him. A lot of stories like that in wrestling that tend to pop up. It's like the drugs caught up to him. Yeah, it's like Eddie Guerrero, one of the all-time greats. The drugs caught up to him. It's just like that happens way too much, unfortunately.
Well, what's crazy to me is seeing all these stories, especially Shawn Michaels, where basically everyone is like, that guy was drugged out of his mind, like every day. How could he put on those incredible matches completely stoned and high? Like, how? I mean, I guess, athletes do it and stuff like that, and you're just that good. You can do it, but I cannot imagine being able to perform at such a high level in the ring when you're completely, like, coped out of your mind, especially considering that, wrestling is so dangerous. I mean, these guys their bodies get destroyed. I mean, can you imagine someone completely high as a kite and one wrong move and you've basically potentially, put someone in a wheelchair. So it's crazy. Sorry, Steve. I apologize. Actually, I don't. Shawn Michaels is great. Bret Hart is not as good, and you're going to have to just be okay with that for the rest of your life.
I can't help it. There are some noticeable huge names that didn't pop up on either of our lists. Like Steve Austin. Like he is an all-time great, but I can't deny that. And, but at the same time, it's no, he's not on my list. Definitely
I don't like that
undoubtedly.
shtick. Like the beer shtick stuff wasn't really my thing.
Well, it caught on in the '90s more or less because he was the everyman who was going up against their boss, and that's something bizarrely enough that hadn't been done in wrestling up to that point, and it just caught fire, and he made it work. With undeniably, while he was in that stint in the '90s, he was undeniably the most popular wrestler that has ever been for that little bit of time. Like Hulk Hogan couldn't have touched him at his Hulk Hogan's heyday versus Steve Austin's super high above it. No
Really?
one
You think that? I don't know, man.
100%.
Hogan was in movies and shit
like
that.
yeah,
My
I feel
mom
like
knew who
maybe
Hulk Hogan is. She's not gonna know who Stone Cold
adjusted
Steve
for
Austin is.
inflation, I feel like Hogan is always going to be up top.
I mean,
No,
I remember
no.
in school hearing about Hulk Hogan. It's like Hulk Hogan. Even though I didn't watch wrestling, it's like I don't know. I
How many
disagree
people
with
do
that
you
statement.
How many people do you still see going around with their Hulk Hogan shirts? None. You will still see to this day 316 shirts out there in the wild. Not even in a wrestling arena, just in the wild in general.
But you have to gauge that by what the normies think, right? If you went up to your mom or your grandma and be like, "Hey, do you know who Hulk Hogan is?" They're gonna say, "Yeah." If you went up to do you know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is? They're gonna be like, "Who's that?" Right?
No, 100% wrong. They would absolutely know who Stone Cold is.
I'm going to test my mom. I'm going to
I'm
test
with
my
Matt
mom
on
next
this
time I
one.
talk to her. Hey, Mom, who's Stone Cold Steve Austin? And if she says, I don't know who that is, I'm going to be like, who's Hulk Hogan?
She'll what she's going to say is, wasn't he a wrestler? I'm not going to say she's like, oh yeah, I remember watching his. I'm not saying
this
that.
sounds like backtracking.
Yeah, you're backtracking.
That's exactly what I was saying. It's like people know who he is. His heyday was he was a hell of a lot more popular than Hogan in his heyday.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not endorsing this Ronin response.
I don't think so. But listeners, leave a comment below if you've got this far into the episode. Let us know.
Yeah,
Was Stone Cold
it's
Steve
fine.
Austin more popular than Hulk Hogan in their respective heydays?
Yeah, go on ahead and tell Matt and Steve how they're both wrong. Yeah, go for it. Go for it, one listener.
So I think at some point in the future, we need to have, because there's a bunch of wrestling things we could talk about. We could do top moves, and apparently the $1 Million Man's punch is going to be on the list.
Man, I love it.
I think it would be fun at some point to talk about favorite moves,
Yeah.
and then shit that just completely takes you out of a match.
Oh, there's so much in that category.
Yeah.
But we can save that for a future episode if people give a shit about this one.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, everyone, thanks for listening to an episode of Two Mats, One Steve. Did you like this wrestling talk? Would you like us to talk more wrestling? I didn't even get into I tried watching a Royal Rumble for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was straight trash. However, here's something I was going to ask you guys. Do either of you guys have a female wrestler that you would recommend me watch? Who's actually really good?
Most of the ones, the modern, within the last 5-6 years, I would honestly say it's most of the women wrestlers today are especially more particularly in WWE, the women's division much better than the men's division, which it's 15, 20 years ago, when it was Trish Stratus or Lita, they were the only two good ones. Otherwise, all of the women's division was just there to be eye candy. That is not true anymore. Now they are genuinely fucking great. There are a couple that are there purely for tits, but most of them are really fucking good.
Well, when I was watching that Royal Rumble, the only thing I found interesting in that entire stupid thing was the women's Royal Rumble, because they actually, when they would come out, they seemed like they actually had characters, they were playing characters, which is what I like. And I think when you have a wrestler who's playing a character, it helps me get into storylines a lot more. And I guess my favorite type of wrestlers for the most part other than Undertaker, are the really athletic wrestlers who will jump off the top rope and do crazy things and things like that. And it seemed like the women were doing a lot more than that than the
Yeah, look up Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn, and you'll understand what I mean.
Okay, well you send me that YouTube link and I will watch it. So thank you everybody for listening to Two Mats One Steve Wrestling Talk tonight. I think we can all agree. I feel like I'm closer to Ronan now that he agrees that Shawn Michaels is one of the greatest of all time. I'm a little disappointed he's still not number 1 on his list, but hey, number 2 is still, the equal
Number
of
2
Bret
is
Hart.
exactly what Shawn Michaels is.
No, it's not. I think I wonder if you were to ask Bret Hart, like honestly, like okay, put aside all the bullshit you've ever had, who's the better wrestler? Who was the better wrestler? Would Bret Hart say it was you? It was you, Sean.
I think in one of his books, like he actually like ranked wrestlers. Like he gave them. Because I never read. I heard like Jim Cornette talk about this at one point, but it's somewhere out there is like some sort of list that Bret Hart did where he assigned scores to like in-ring ability and promos and whatnot. Because what stood out is that like Bret Hart actually gave Hulk Hogan like a higher score than Bret gave himself. We can look and see if Shawn Michaels is on that list.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting.
But not right now because I don't know where to begin my search.
For sure. This is the last hand, guys. I'm going all in. Going all in. So we'll end this show going
Why do I
all
do this?
in.
Why do I
in.
do this to myself?
Off the top
I
rope,
went all
Ronan.
in.
Come on.
I put all in. Come on now, all in. There we go. Why do I do this to myself?
Yep, here we go, folks. So pay attention here. Who's going to come out on top? Will it be Shawn Michaels? Will it be Bret Hart?
It needs to. Why the? How many times do I have to hit all in? Fucking 3 goddamn times? Jesus
Clearly,
fucking Christ!
you are a bad wrestler, Ronan. Come on, Shawn Michaels.
I'm
Come through
fucking
one more
due,
time,
all
HBK.
right? I am due.
Give me some sweet chin music on Steve right here. Oh boy, I had a bad hand.
So all 3 of us, like Steve, probably has the best hand out of the 3 of us.
Oh, well, Steve has a flush, so
Yeah, fucking
Steve
Bret Hart
Likey.
still sucks. He's still not the best. He's still no Shawn Michaels.
I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. I always lose.
Oh yeah,
Fucking...
well, looks like I had the winning argument. Thank you, Prominent Smoker, for agreeing that Bret Hart is greatest.
And
Busted.
cut. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel